Well, fantastic. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marci Nettles, and I am your host. And I am so excited to be here with you again with another phenomenal guest. This show is all about helping you see that no matter where you're at in life, it can be tough. But I promise you, if you just make some small decisions, take some small steps, you can break through. Just like my guests sharing their stories, their breakdown opportunities, and then what they've done to be able to move forward into their futures and what they're doing today. So my guest today is Dr. Hayley D Quinn. She is a fellow human being, the anti-burnout business coach for service-based business owners, supervisor for psychologists and allied health professionals, trainer and clinical psychologist. She is also the host of the Welcome to Self with Dr. Hayley D Quinn podcast. Originally from the UK, she is now based in Australia. Hayley was a solo parent for many years, navigating raising a child, completing university studies, including a PhD, work, and life. She is passionate about self-care, compassion, and sustainable ways of working. This comes after a long period of burnout, chronic illness, and learning the hard way how to manage a full and meaningful life without compromising her health and well-being. Hayley knows what it means to work hard. She also knows what it means to work too hard and in the wrong ways. She is continually learning how to do it differently to create work practices and life habits that are sustainable. Over the years, Hayley has made changes in how she takes care of herself and has redesigned her business structure to allow her to move forward and build a thriving business working at a pace that suits her, her health, and the lifestyle that she wants, and has worked with many people to assist them to do the same. She is passionate about helping people move towards their business goals in a way that prioritizes sustainable ways of working and their own well-being so they can achieve the outcomes they want without burning out. Hayley strongly believes that if you thrive in your business will too. Or really, it's if you thrive, your business will too. So, Dr. Hayley, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, most definitely. I'm excited about this conversation. And first of all, we did come up with a topic together, the title, and that is You're on a Fast Track to Burnout. What Now with Dr. Hayley Quinn. So could you please start off, first of all, with sharing just a little bit more about who you are and what your early life was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh, such a big question, isn't it? Who are you? um, yeah, well, I grew up in the UK and had a lot of struggles growing up. Didn't really feel like I fitted in the world. Was really quite disconnected from who I was and what I needed, and made a decision at about, I think I was 25 when I decided to come over to Australia, which in essence was quite an impulsive decision. It wasn't very long between kind of making that decision and getting on a plane. Turned out it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. And again, I was really quite disconnected. I was on a working holiday visa, so I could only work temporarily in places. So I was doing different bits of jobs and just generally was, I guess, doing the best I could. You know, I think we do the best we can under the circumstances we're in, always with the skills and knowledge that we have at the time. And back then I was doing the best I could. And I guess it depends how much detail you want me to go into straight away. I don't want to kind of concise everything into a short story.
Well, let's do this. Let's go back a little bit to what was the relationship you really had with yourself when you were a child and as you went through your adolescence and into your 20s. How did you feel about yourself and where did those foundations come from?
Yeah, so when I look back now, I mean, at the time I didn't think about it at all. I didn't think about those things. And when I look back now, I really didn't have a good relationship with myself. I was extremely self-critical, very down on myself. I struggled a lot with my mental health. And yeah, it wasn't a nice place to be. I wasn't a happy child. And I think as an adolescent, I always sort of say I bounced around a lot, you know, trying to figure out where do I fit, where do I not fit. Later in my life, I'm a late diagnosed neurodivergent woman, which I didn't know as a young person, which probably would have been really helpful. So for me, there was lots of self-criticism, lots of feeling like somehow I was the problem. It was because of who I was that I didn't fit. And I think with that came a lot of shame
Mm.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's get into a couple things here. First of all, did you have a good relationship with your parents? What was your home life like?
Not really. not, not really, no. I had a complicated relationship with my mum, and I had a very close relationship with my dad, but he also was away a lot. So that was hard for me as a young person. And my parents separated when I was 17 as well.
Yeah, so that's a major disruption in your life, right? It's like we think when we're young that our parents are like this rock and that they're just going to be there. And then when something happens to separate that, we start to question who we
Yeah,
are in that as well. And then you mentioned being neurodivergent. Could
yeah.
you explain what that is for the audience in case they aren't sure what that is themselves? Could you clear that up?
Yeah, absolutely. So neurodivergence covers a whole range of things. But for me, I've been diagnosed as autistic and I also have ADHD.
Ah, okay. Okay. So we already know that the autistic or autism spectrum spans like from clear from one far side to the left, clear far side to the right. And so, as you said, that can be very diverse, very
Yeah,
diverse.
so what we do know, and I would like to just talk on that, is we've been thinking for a long time that the spectrum is this line that you're at one end or the other, and that people think everyone's on the spectrum, which it actually isn't the case. What we know now is the spectrum is actually more of a circle, and it kind of looks at the different aspects of functioning and different things that we may struggle with or not struggle with. So it's more of a circle than a line. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
No, I appreciate that because you're absolutely correct. Because we talk about a spectrum being, you're either far to one side or far to, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, where if
Yeah,
it's a circle, it's like you could
yeah,
actually be a little bit kind of a bouncing around a little bit. Things can
yeah.
change.
Yeah, well, so not even so much that things can change, but like some people might have a lot of trouble with social skills. Somebody else might have, like for myself, I'm very sensitive to sounds and smells, things like that, textures. Somebody else might not be. So it's almost like if we think about a circle, um, I might be strongly on these points and not on these ones, and you might be. Oh, people can't perhaps see what I'm doing either. Just
Well, the
pointing
ones
to
that
the
are
different
watching,
segments.
yeah, the
Yeah,
ones that are watching on YouTube can, because guess what,
yeah,
tribe? We are live on YouTube right now too. But for the
yeah,
listeners, yes, explain that a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. So if you're thinking about different people will present in different ways and have different things that impact them. So say there were 10 things that we were talking about. Four of them might be something that I have a lot of challenges with, and the other six I might not have those challenges. Whereas for somebody else with autism, they might be challenged by some of the other ones that I'm not challenged by.
Okay, okay. So how I am understanding what you're saying is that it's like it's this grouping of challenges, and you might have personal experience in certain ones of these challenges where someone else may not have that problem, and
Yeah,
yet they have their own of the grouping. Instead of it being on a line where it's like you would
yeah,
find yourself only in one space, in the circle, it's affected more areas than just one space.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
will say, I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining that. It wasn't what I expected to be talking about this morning. And I will just say that over here in Australia, it is quite early in the morning. So
Yes, and
my
we thank you.
apologies for such a clunky explanation of
No,
that.
you're okay. We are so grateful that you were willing to get up early to be here with us today. I am so grateful, and I know that this message, even though that's not what you were expected to talk about, I think it's important for people to understand where you're coming from, though, too.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
experiences that you've had, because it all plays a part into this whole, upheaval that you had in your life, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, had I had my diagnosis earlier in life, my life would have looked really quite different and I would have understood myself more. And I think as we talk more about my journey and the changes, I can expand on that.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm looking forward to that. And I agree with you. It would be great if we had our own little handbook when we were first born and we could just read it and see exactly who we are and what's going on with us and all that, and then be able to base our decisions on that.
Yeah.
It's not the way things happen, is it?
No, not at all.
No, no. So we've talked a little bit about how you kind of weren't your best friend, that you were not exactly your
Mm.
best ally. What part did like self-doubt and shame play in your life, and how critical were you of yourself?
Oh, up until recent times, extremely. That was a lot of a lot of how I operated in the world. I left school just before 16. So in England at the time, you would get to the point where you do O levels and then go on to A levels. I'm not sure in the US what the system is, but here in Australia, it would be the equivalent of O levels is grade 10 and A levels is grade 12. I left school at the time I was doing my O levels, but didn't go to some of my exams, failed spectacularly others of my exams. So spent a lot of my life as well thinking I was stupid. As you said in my intro, I have a PhD. I'm obviously not stupid. I don't think you get to do a PhD if you're stupid. But I spent my whole life thinking I'm a school dropout, I'm stupid. And what that meant was I wasn't willing to try things. I didn't want to try anything in case I failed because I already felt bad enough. I didn't want to sort of add to the pile of, you're not good at this either. So that was for a long time, and that made impacts on my life because there was things that I might have wanted to do, even if it was just fun stuff. I can remember being out with some friends and they wanted to play pool, and I was like, yeah, nah, I don't do that because if I wasn't going to be good at it, I would have felt embarrassed. Whereas now in my life, I'm like, who cares? Fail fast and move on. you know?
Exactly. Well, and as you mentioned, it's like you missed out on a lot of things
Yeah.
that very well could have been something you really love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So okay, so you already mentioned that you did move from the UK over to Australia, like in your early 20s. So
Yeah.
tell me, what was it that really promoted that move in the first place? And I know you said that it was kind of a impulse thing, but were you running from something, or were you just ready for something new?
Um, all of the above. I think I I was unhappy over in the UK. I wanted something different. Somebody I knew had been living over there, um, and had talked about how lovely it was. I had thought maybe if I could get away and have a new start, things could be different for me. So again, I don't know that at the time, like now I'm very conscious about my decisions, very mindful about what I do in my life. I check in with my values. I'm very values aligned. Back then, not, back then I wasn't. Back then it was like, oh, Australia, yeah, that sounds good. I'll try that. And I came over here on a working holiday visa. And turns out when I came over here, I did some traveling, actually met somebody and ended up staying and applied for permanent residency here.
And all in all, are you glad that you did?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This was probably one of the best choices I'd made in my life for myself and for my own personal growth. And I don't know I would have gone on that journey in the UK. I don't know if perhaps my mental health actually would have deteriorated far more, or maybe I would have gone on that journey. But also this country here, and I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the First Nations people of Australia and their connection to land and country, and pay my respects to elders past and present. This is one of the most beautiful places on earth, and I feel really, really grateful to be here. It's fantastic, wonderful
You,
place.
Australia is actually one of those places that from the time I was a child, I've wanted to go, and yet I still haven't done it. I've been many other places So it's time for me to get to Australia as well because I feel a calling to go there. And so I can see why you're saying that. And yet you said that it's one of the best things that you've done. Yet, like you said, much of your growth happened there. And when you're going through growth, it doesn't mean it's a good time.
No.
No, no.
No, no,
Yeah. So you met somebody and you stayed. Was this the same person that you ended up in a relationship with long term?
no, it
No.
wasn't.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So you ended up in a relationship where you had a child
Yeah.
and also experienced a lot of domestic violence. Can
Yeah.
you share what that experience was, what it was like for you, and how you were finally able to break free of that?
Yeah. So I had done some training with an organization called Lifeline over here, which is like a counseling helpline. I knew when I came over that I wanted to, well, even when I was in the UK, I was going to come over here for a year and then I was going to go back and I wanted to study social work. I was going to figure out how this school dropout could get back to learning something. And I had done some training with an organization called Lifeline and learnt about the cycle of violence and things like that. And then I had met somebody and was in a relationship. It wasn't ideal.
Mm.
Went through some really difficult times. Thankfully, because of the training I'd done, and it still took me a while. I mean, I ended up having a child with him, who again is one of the most, greatest things. One of my greatest achievements is my darling son, and would never ever regret that. It still took me, even though I'd had that training, it still took me time to realize what was happening. And then even when I did realize what was happening, it can be really tricky. And I mean, it's a really complex area, and we certainly wouldn't have time to kind of go into all the details of the complexities of, family and domestic violence here. But even when people are aware that they are in a domestic violence relationship, there's so many complexities to why people don't leave. And it really does anger me sometimes when you hear people say, well, why didn't they just leave? Because it is so complex, particularly when there's children involved. Thankfully for me, I had some good support in some friendships here. I had support of a really good GP, and something inside me was just, there's just no way that I can stay in this and raise my son in this either. So he was 9 months old when I left the relationship, which at the time was really scary. I didn't know what life was going to look like. I was still, a young woman, and yeah, but for me, the fear of leaving was, I guess, less than the fear of staying. So I made that decision, and again, absolutely so glad I did. And now, down the track, I was a single mum till my son was 13, and now have been, extremely happily married to a very beautiful, gentle, caring, generous, wonderful human being, for the past, 11 or 12 years.
You know what? Aren't we so glad for second chances?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
You were actually primed to be a victim, though, in the domestic violence, and just the way that you were so self-critical about
Yeah.
yourself and you took
Yeah.
all the blame on yourself, probably.
Yeah.
And yet, how long had you been in the relationship before you had your son?
Oh, I can't remember, but it wasn't very long.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
Well, sometimes women specifically need to have something that's outside of themselves to leave
Mm.
for,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
right?
that's the thing. I was so I'm just noticing this, these are hard topics to talk about, right?
Well,
Um
it is, and that's why we share though, because part of
yeah,
the sharing
absolutely.
is you're healing. You're still healing as you're
Yeah.
sharing to help someone else that might be going through something so similar. You're still
Yeah.
healing.
Look, I mean, I've done a lot of work around I guess what's showing up for me is is that sense of compassion for my younger self.
Mhm.
You know, it's when I think about her, and I'm so grateful to that younger part of me as well. You know, the decisions that she made when she was so scared. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's more what's coming up, is that sort of compassion for my younger self. And now I've forgotten what we were talking about.
Well, since we're here talking about your younger self and you're in this emotional space, this heart space, what would you like to say to your younger self right now?
Oh, I would say to her, darling, you are so precious. You are so brave, so courageous, and thank you so much for taking such a challenging and scary step. But my goodness, look at what you've done, and look at where you've come from, and look at where you are. Yeah, and I love you dearly.
Oh, yes.
And those are words that I would never earlier in my life have been able to say to myself. And I think that's been the most profound thing for me, is this change in relationship with myself. And this is the work I do with other people, is, you know, change the relationship you have with yourself,
Yeah.
because everything else can change from that.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, and you know, being where you're at right now, is that you wouldn't be who you are today without having to have traveled all of those steps that you've been through,
yeah.
going through all the trials, the pain, the stress, the hardship. You wouldn't be you.
No, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I think, you know, it would also be nice if some of the things had not happened.
of course.
But that's not how it is it? So
No, it's not. It's not at all. It isn't.
I
So
think
you
it's
mentioned,
really,
go ahead, keep going.
sorry, I was going to say, I think it's really about us going gently with ourselves, and like I said earlier in the piece, you know, recognizing that wherever we are in life, we are doing the best we can with, you know, the skills and knowledge that we've got in the circumstances that we're in, and we can't do better than that. And then when we know more, we can do more, and we can do differently.
Yes, yes. And expecting yourself to do better with something you don't know is
Yeah,
actually very unkind. And
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not fair, not fair at all
Yeah,
to yourself. So
yeah.
you had mentioned that you were actually a single mom for almost 13 years. How did you survive and actually provide for you and for your son?
Well, it was important for me. Oh, excuse me, clear my throat. It was important for me to find something I knew I would kind of flourish in, and want to be doing. I'd done sort of admin work. I'd worked in companies as PAs. I'd done lots of that kind of PA, secretarial, admin, bookkeeping work throughout my life, and I was very good at it, but I didn't enjoy it. So I kind of had this crossroads of, okay, do I just go and find work that I know, or will I actually make things a little bit more complicated for myself and go back and see if I can study? And that was the choice that I made. So I went to university and I studied a Bachelor of Psychology, did my honours, and then went on and did a clinical PhD. So I spent, I think it was 9 years studying, which had its pros and cons. I was working at times up to 3 jobs part time while studying full time, so that I could support my son. Here in Australia, we also have a system where you can get support from the government, and I was very fortunate to have support there as well. The upside of being a university student with a small child was that I had all the school holidays off. And then when school holidays went back, university holidays are actually a little bit longer. So that meant I actually had some time to kind of rest and have some time to myself whilst my son had gone back to school. So that was challenging. But again, at the time, I didn't spend time thinking about how challenging it was, because if I did, I probably wouldn't have been able to get through it. I was just
I,
head down, get on with it, like do what you've got to do, work hard. And it was an interesting process for me because I did the bachelor. I started getting really good grades, which of course shocked the heck out of me because
Right? Being the dropout.
I dropped out of school, and then I had lecturers saying you're going to do postgraduate study, and I was like, hadn't even thought of that. Went on to the PhD. It wasn't until my fourth year, because I did a clinical PhD, which here is like a combination of a 2 years master's and a 3 year clinical, 3 year research PhD combined, and they give you 4 years to do a 5 year load. And it wasn't until my fourth year that it really sunk in with me that I'm not stupid. I actually have a high level of intelligence. I'm very capable. So by the time I finished that process, that had been really helpful and healing for me in terms of this kind of calling myself a school dropout, which I don't do anymore, only in the context of telling the story.
Right.
So it was a challenging time, but I also have some really beautiful friendships from there as well. And it did give me a lot of time to be able to be with my son as well.
Yeah. So words matter, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
So how
Absolutely.
important, what would you say to anybody that's listening right now about the importance of changing the narrative that they are telling themselves?
Look, I think it really does impact on how you feel and the decisions that you make. And, we'll come back to, when we think about being compassionate to ourselves, we'll come back to this sort of question of, if your best friend was telling you your story, would you speak to them the way you speak to yourself? And everybody says, no, of course I wouldn't. Of course I wouldn't. That would be awful. So why would you do that with yourself? Speak to yourself as if you're talking to somebody you really care about.
Yes. Agreed. 100%. If you want something different than where you're at today, you've got to change the things that you're thinking and what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important. So as you were going through everything that you were doing to be able to provide and to be able to take care of your son, I mean, it's like I was getting tired. I'm looking at this, I'm like, you're a mother. So taking care of your son is a full-time job. You're working 3 jobs at one time, going to school for 9 years. And I mean, yes, you had some little bit of rest days in there, as you mentioned, that you'd have a day tacked on at the end of your son's vacation or something like that. But how did this physically impact you? What did this do to your body? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I felt like I was taking pretty good care of myself. And in many ways, I was. I was making sure that I wasn't up working through the night trying to get assignments done. I was, focusing on sleep. I was eating as well as I could, all those things. But I still was quite disconnected from myself. And I think in some ways, I look back and go, well, I kind of had to be. I had to just kind of get on with it. I couldn't stop and think too much. Oh, how am I feeling about all this right now? Because I'd been like, so overwhelmed. So whilst I was taking pretty good care of myself, I'm not a robot, and anybody doing that kind of level of activities and holding that kind of level of stress is going to be impacted. Like you'd be so fortunate if you weren't. So I became qualified. I got into my career, and I hit a really significant point of burnout. And I'd been physically unwell. I'd had lots of different symptoms. My health had started deteriorating, and I'd seen the GP and I'd seen various specialists over a number of years. And like, unfortunately, I don't know what it's like in America, but certainly here, and I believe in the UK, women's health isn't always very well researched, and women can take many years to get answers on health concerns, which certainly is something that needs to change in the world. And so I had a significant period of burnout and ultimately was diagnosed with chronic illness. And I had to leave where I was working. I was at a practice where we all worked for ourselves, but all worked together, which was really lovely. And I had to make a really, really difficult decision because I loved working there. I loved my clients. I loved my colleagues. But I physically, I would drive half an hour to get there. And by the time I got there, I was in pain. I was feeling sick. Like I just couldn't keep doing it. So I had to make the decision to leave there and kind of set up a situation where I could have a home-based practice. And I minimized most of my clients, had a very, very small caseload, and spent time starting to learn, what do I need? How am I going to set this up so I can work in a way that isn't going to impact my health? I made changes to how I was taking care of myself. I shifted to a plant-based diet, which had phenomenal results for me. And I just really started this process of, what does life need to look like if I'm going to be able to do the things I enjoy, earn an income, have time for family and friends, and generally be well. So that's what I started doing.
Yeah, so good. Because it's not just one thing, and it's not
No,
something that just overnight you can take care of.
no,
You
absolutely not.
you have built up so much stress in your life that affects every cell of your body. It's not just, one area, it's affecting every single thing. And as a matter of fact, being independent is pretty important to you, isn't it?
Less so now. Less so now. It was absolutely, and I call it's pseudo independence, isn't it? Because none of us can
Yeah.
be independent fully.
No.
But yeah, that was very important to me. But less so now.
Yeah. How did
You
that
know,
journey take place though? Because it's hard to go from being super, super independent to being able
yeah,
to allow other people in to help us.
yeah. So being extremely unwell, and I was with my now husband at the time when I was at my lowest point of health, which I'm very, very grateful for because he was amazing. I had no choice. Like I would get up to try and do something and I'd do a small task and I would literally be laying on the couch, really, really fatigued and in a lot of pain. So he was doing a lot of things for me. Yeah, I had to surrender. I had no choice. But one of the things I was so grateful for, and is a big part of my work, is in my training, I had attended a training with Dr. Dennis Tersh, who is an American psychologist. He was over in Australia. And I use a framework called compassion focused therapy. And I was at a training for this. And during those sort of trainings, we do experiential kind of role plays, things like that. And Dennis had asked for a volunteer, for somebody to do what we call a real play. So you, rather than using an imagined story, use your own. And I had decided to use my health story. And in compassion focused therapy, we do chair work where we talk about multiple selves. So we're not just one version of ourselves, we are multiple versions of self. And an easy way to think about that is, if you've ever been invited to a party and there's part of you that really wants to go to the party and there's part of you that just wants to stay home and sit on the couch. So, we've got all these different versions of ourselves. So in chair work, I had my kind of my anxious self, the part of me that was anxious about how my health was, my critical self, who was extremely loud when I was non-achieving and not able to do things, and then my compassionate self. And during that experience, one, I had been really shocked at how self-critical and shaming of myself. I had this real kind of internalized ableism of like, you should be able to do these things. You should be able to get on and do everything. You shouldn't be relying on other people to do things for you, et cetera, et cetera. You're lazy. Your husband's not going to want to stay with you because you don't do anything. I mean, it was just brutal. And then moved to the chair for the compassionate self. And I had this really profound experience that has changed the trajectory of my life, where I connected with myself probably for the first time, like really connected with myself, and this acknowledgement that I am worthwhile, I am lovable, no matter what I'm doing or what I'm not doing or what I'm capable of. I am enough
Mm.
just as me, Hayley, human being. And as that happened, I just sat with myself and I was just like, oh, welcome to self. And it was just this moment of really meeting myself. And that was the start of lots of changes in really fully embodying. I've been learning about compassion for a number of years at that point, but that was the point where it really kind of came home and I was fully embodying that. And yeah, just really, even to this day, I look back at that and just go, wow, that was such a pivotal moment in my life. And even though I had been learning about how to be kinder to myself and, being more mindful, I've been, I had a mindfulness practice. It was that really meeting myself and realizing that, all of us are inherently worthy, no matter
Yes.
what. And if we can treat ourselves as such, life looks very different.
Yeah.
And that we are part of a common humanity. And it's okay to reach out to other people for help. And actually, that's quite a gift to other people. Because if we think about it, when we can help someone else, that feels good for us. Yeah. So when we
Yes.
deny that, if we say, no, you can't come and help me, well, we're denying that to somebody else as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely. So you were able to break down those walls to
Yeah.
be able to go in and find that innocent part of yourself. That those walls really, they were put up to protect her for one reason or another, right?
Yeah.
We all have those walls,
Yeah.
but it's a matter of being willing to let them down
Yeah.
and to be able to come out and know that you are worthy and to be able to get connected to yourself in such a way that you love yourself.
Yeah.
And that's when you can truly start to love others.
Yeah. And
So
I
important.
think,
So
I
good.
think, for me, I had been doing a lot of learning for my client work, but also the beautiful thing about compassion focused therapy is it's great for doing work with clients. And I use those concepts with my clients and with my coaching clients. I use the concepts from that as well. But it's also the sort of framework that is best embodied and learnt from the inside out. So I'd been doing a lot of that and I'd been learning and I've been building my own compassionate self. And I think that for me was a really important piece to then be able to really connect and see yourself for who you really are.
Mm.
And that's all parts of you. That's, facing the things that you may have done that you're not so proud of, or parts of you that you don't like so much. We've all got a dark side. So doing that work to kind of build that, so you have that added courage to make the changes that you need to make.
I love that. And I love that you are taking what you've been through, what you've learned, and helping other people. Because if we learn something and we have healed, it doesn't really do the world any good unless we help others do the same,
Mm,
right? By
yeah.
using our experiences. What would you say are the most significant lessons that you've learned during this process of your life?
Wow. What are the most significant lessons? Gosh, that feels like such a big question. And
I
it's
know,
early in the
right?
morning.
I know. I'm so
Most,
sorry.
probably as soon as I get off here, I'll have some really profound answers. Um, most significant lessons. Well, the things that come up for me is one, don't underestimate yourself.
Oh, good one.
Do not underestimate yourself. And if anyone listening or watching is doing that right now, please stop. You are so much more amazing than you even know. um, Finding the right people to support you is really important. I think finding, and again, that there's no one right answer for any of this. We are so individual, and finding whatever it is that supports you. And I like to think of those things as like, what are your internal resources? So what are the skills? What are the qualities you have? One of our internal resources that can support us so beautifully is our breath. learning to use your breath. And then what are the external resources that we've got? And that might be people, it might be things. So really finding your own support system that's going to work for you. And like I said, that's going to be different for everybody. So don't underestimate yourself, find the right support system, learn how to be more compassionate. Like changing the relationship. I mean, this is the truth that I know. If you want sustainable change, you need to change the relationship with yourself in all areas, whether that is in your personal life, whether that is in your business, no matter what. I truly believe we need to change the relationship with ourselves to be able to make sustainable change in other areas.
Oh, I think that you actually did a really good job there, even though it's so early in the morning. Really great job there. So don't underestimate yourself. Find the right people to support you. Find your skills, qualities, your breath, external resources that you have. Find those as well. And then learn how to be more compassionate with yourself. Those are great lessons to have learned for yourself in your own healing journey, but also to pass on to other people.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I
So,
think, can I just add one more?
sure, please.
Is, and I say this to people often, the thing I love most about choice is you can always make another choice. So if you make a choice in your life, and I've made lots of really crappy choices in my life, and then I got to make another one, and then another one, and another one. And now, majority of the time, the choices I make for myself are very, very considered, very values aligned, and I'm happy with the outcome for the majority of the time. That didn't used to be the case. So if you make choices in your life, you can always make another. And being gentle and kind to yourself about the fact that perhaps it wasn't the right choice, but it was the right choice at the time, is going to be far more helpful than saying, oh, I can't believe what an idiot I am because I made that choice, or I'm so stupid, or whatever your own little inner critic says to you. Being gentle and kind is going to be far more helpful and far more motivating for you than being critical.
Oh, that is amazing. Amazing. I think that if people can just shift their mindset from thinking that they're going to fail to thinking that they're going to learn,
Yeah,
right? Just
absolutely.
don't
Everything's
don't be
data.
afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid to make a different choice and to do something different. You're not going to fail, you're going to grow. Just
Yeah.
claim that. I'm going to grow for sure. Well, I would love for you to share with the What Now Tribe more about your podcast, Welcome to Self. Can you tell us what that is about and how they can get connected with your podcast?
Absolutely. So it started purely as a podcast during COVID for other psychologists and helping professionals. And it was called Caring for the Human in the Therapist Chair. It then evolved as I evolved and is focused on service-based business owners or business owners. And it really is about self-care, self-compassion, and sustainable ways of working. There's solo episodes, there's great guest episodes, and we share kind of tips and stories around how we can take care of ourselves as business owners, because I really do believe that if you thrive, your business will too. The podcast is likely going to be going through a slight name change. So it will still be that content, but it will have a slight name change coming up, which I'm excited about. And I can't share that name with you yet because I haven't chosen it.
That's fine. That is fine. That's fine.
But yeah, so
One thing
we
I
were
want
on.
to, yeah, one thing before you tell them where to go, one thing I want people to think, because if you're listening right now and you're not an entrepreneur, you're not a business owner, or not a doctor, right? We all, if we can be more compassionate with ourselves and if we can implement these strategies that she is sharing on her podcast, I mean, we'll all be better and be able to show up better in our families, at our jobs, at our churches, anywhere that we show up, we can show up better. So I don't want people to think that just because they don't have a business or because they don't, fall into that niche that you're talking about, that it's not for them, because it very well could be exactly what they need.
Absolutely. And I've got people who are not business owners that have, let me know that the content is really helpful. And a lot of it, some of the episodes might be quite focused, but it would be obvious if they were, like I had somebody coming on talking about copywriting. Um, but also in that episode, lots of talk around self-care because I can't help myself. Like it's such a passion area for me that no matter what you're talking about in terms of business, I'm going to bring it back to, but how do you take care of yourself when you're doing that? How do
Well,
you not burn out when you're doing that?
that's the key, right? You have found that to be the secret sauce. So of course.
Absolutely. So I think, I'd love people to tune in and always love to hear what people think of the episodes as well. And that's on all platforms or also at my website. They can access all episodes on my website as well.
Okay, great. So where can our audience connect with you and follow you? What is your website?
So my website is www.drhayley, Hayley D Quinn, QUINN.com. I'm on Instagram under Dr. Hayley D Quinn and Facebook under Dr. Hayley D Quinn and LinkedIn under Dr. Hayley D Quinn.
Fantastic. So you should be easy to find. And I would
Yeah.
highly recommend that the What Now Tribe goes and finds you at least on one of these platforms and follows you and just gets a daily dose. Just take in just a little bit of this goodness, because if you change your mind about yourself, you're going to be able to change the life around you. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, and we also have a freebie for the listeners today. So I'm excited to be able to announce that. Make sure that you go to marcinettles.com/freebies for the free boundaries guide, which boundaries, oh my gosh, before we leave here today, maybe you can talk about a little bit about how important boundaries are that Dr. Hayley is offering today. So that's marcinettles.com/freebies for the free boundaries guide. So mention just a little bit and give us your, final words for the tribe, but share how important boundaries are.
Oh goodness me! Again, such a huge topic.
I
So
know. I'm
to do
sorry.
that to do that justice in a short period of time, but
Yeah.
I guess the really short version is they are really really important,
Really, really,
and
really, really important.
really important. And people often find it challenging because they think, well, if I put boundaries in place, people aren't going to like that. Well, you know what? That's actually true. Some people are not going to like it, particularly if you're somebody that's not had boundaries with them. But what we do know is boundaries actually help everybody, because when we know somebody's firm with their boundaries, or flexibly firm with their boundaries, we know where we stand. People know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and you also know if you can spend some time setting a boundary, you also know what you're willing and not willing to accept, or willing and not willing to do. So I think we need to think about what are the boundaries we want to put in place with other people. And it's okay that they differ. You might have much firmer boundaries with certain people in your life and less firm, more flexible boundaries with others, because perhaps they don't try and violate your boundaries as much. And then you want to have some of the boundaries with yourself as well and honor those. What are the things I'm going to, commit to and do for myself, and not cross those boundaries for myself as well. So I think
All of that is,
ultimately, we can all benefit if we have
yes.
firm but flexible boundaries in place.
Yes, absolutely. I truly believe that we teach other people how to treat us
Mm.
first by how we treat ourselves.
Mm. And
It's
I
so
think,
important.
the other thing with that as well is, if we're going to practice putting in boundaries, practice with somebody that feels safe and easy. And you might even have somebody in your life that you could say, I know I need to work on my boundaries. I really want to practice. Could you help me practice? I'm going to set some boundary here. And then you could try and cross it. And I'm going to say, actually, no, that's not okay. So, there's different ways you can do that.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. I am so grateful that you spent some time here with us today. Is there any final words beyond the boundaries that you would like to share? Because you are doing some amazing work, because it
Thank
is
you.
true. I think that especially in this day and age, people are expected to do more and more and more. So I think that your call is so timely. So thank you for this
Yeah,
message today.
thank you. Look, I think, particularly in that sort of with the clients I work with in the business space, is the hustle and grind culture is, it needs to be a thing of the past. There's times we can work hard. That's fine, as long as it's not ongoing and it's not coming from a place of threat. But go gently with yourself. There's another psychologist, retired now, Dr. Kelly Wilson. I did a lot of training with. He's one of the founders of acceptance and commitment therapy, and you would go to a training of his, and he would say, "We have a lot to get through, so we need to go slowly, because the slower we go, the quicker we do get there."
It's so good.
Yeah.
That is so good. There's been several times in my life that has been a lesson. It's like
Yeah.
slow down to get there.
Slow down. And the other thing about, I mean, this is like my biggest life hack, is when we slow down, we can actually tune in to the wisdom that we hold. And we all hold such immense wisdom, but there's so much external and often internal noise that we don't hear it, we don't listen to it, we don't act on it. So if we can slow down your breath, you can actually listen to yourself. And then it's that process of starting to trust what it is that you're hearing and being able to take action, so you can create a full, meaningful and values aligned life that you desire and also deserve. So go gently with yourselves.
Oh, perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. The title of your episode is "You're on a Fast Track to Burnout. What Now?" And you have designed your life around
Yeah.
helping other people as well as yourself have the best life. So thank you so
Yeah.
much, Dr. Hayley.
Thank you, Marci. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, as for me, thank you.